in Sefer Yetzira EP6, Mishnah Gimel. And we're learning about 32 forces that are responsible for the way things are. But these 32, they all represent one being. Just like when we speak about a human being, we would say all his body parts represent him, the one that's dwelling within those body parts. And so the same way, the source dwells within the parts. He reveals through the parts, and yet it's the same source. And so we're learning about the 32 in order to get to know that there's really one, and that one is all, and from that all he made things where he can be revealed, or things where he can be concealed, and even things that might seem to go against his desire. All that from his light, from his power that has no limit. And so the goal of this is that we should realize that within all our creations dwells one, within all our speech dwells one, within all our action dwells one, within all of our emotions and all our thoughts dwells one. And we should return all of our parts to that one, and we should return all the forces in the world to that one. And we should realize that we are that one, because there's no one else. There can be no one else. But what about my story? What about what happened to me? What about all the different emotions that I've experienced? This you experienced as part of the one that lives in all. It doesn't mean you're a separate entity, it just means that you experienced that part of him. I experienced a different part of him. Everyone is experiencing different parts of him. Together, he, the one, is everything and lives in everything and is the cause of everything and organizes everything. And when we understand what is, that will be the only way of knowing him, because there's nothing else of him to know other than what he made be and he gave us to interact with. That's how he is known. And so in order for us to know the 32 forces, he gave us all a sample of these 32 forces. And not only did he give us a sample, but our sample is in charge of all the forces themselves. How we use the sample is going to result in the worlds forming the way that they form, in the events of the world taking shape the way the events take shape. Everything is going to result from how we use the 32 forces in order to manifest our reality that we live. And so the meaning of what we're doing is infinitely deep. We can never take it seriously enough. And so how seriously are we supposed to take it? As much as our body can handle. And then the body will evolve to handle more. And then we can take it more seriously. And this is the meaning of Yiras Shamayim. Yiras Shamayim is the amount of seriousness that we can offer to what's taking place. And this is at the root of what decides how our journey will play out. Because the more we are attached to the reality of what we are receiving, the more we are tapping into our resources in order to get it right. The more we feel that it's not important and it's inconsequential, the less we're going to have access to the tools that we were given in order to make a difference. And so the one desires to dwell in the many. He doesn't desire that we completely nullify ourselves to him, because then he doesn't live there anymore. He wants us to be a vessel for the light that he shares, which is the light of existence. And so how do we nullify ourselves? By being fully what he made That's the complete nullification. If there's any part of us playing any types of games, if there's any lack of authenticity, then we are violating his will. There's less of him now. And then we are making ourselves into a God, our idea, our image. And that we can't do. That causes resistance to what was already created, which we don't know. We don't understand what was created. We have to respect what was created and learn to dress that with the right meaning so that we can understand ourselves, so that we can give him his vessel, which he created, which belongs to him. The way that it is the only way he'll accept it, because that's the way he made it. And so from that perspective, every thought and every speech and every action has a context. In which direction is it taking humanity? Is it taking him closer to expressing the one? Or is it creating more conflict with the one? And if we're creating conflict with the one, this is going to last now. This is going to stay as a resistance to reality until we're going to somehow return. Until this part of the spirit is going to remember. There needs to be a process that goes from that state where we don't remember, and there's been distance, and there's resistance, to a healing, a unification, a purification, a return to the truth the way that it really is. And so this is the teaching of the 32 paths, is a teaching of the nature of your soul, the nature of how you become you, the nature of how your thoughts manifest, the nature of why was there anything in the first place? What's the closest we can go to answering these questions, but not in an intellectual way of understanding, but in an experiential way of realizing, of feeling within our body, within our nervous system, the experiences of all these states of being that all together create the lens through which we see reality. To be able to focus in on different areas of this lens, the lens that starts from the infinite one that dwells within all the way to this specific individual with all the different specifications of what it means to be that creature and what it means to be in this location in the galaxies and what it means to be specifically in that body and in those circumstances, and all these lenses, one on top of the other, on top of the other, and then we get to the individual. So this is a ladder through where the infinite dressed up as the individual, this ladder is constantly present. If you're thinking, your thought has a tremendous amount of data that's taken as a context in order for that thought to be able to formulate. There's a specific way of how you're interacting with reality that is way beyond that thought, that is hidden within that thought and the cause of that thought and the reason the thought formed just that way. All the beliefs and experiences, and the fact that you're a human creature, and the fact that you're on this planet at this time with this constellation of stars, and your entire history as an individual, as a species, as existence itself. All of it is somehow there this present moment in order to allow for the next formulation to be accurate. All this is going into this calculation of what happens next. And so there's the ladder from the lowest lenses where you're just you in this individual moment in this specific space, all the way to you when you are not constrained by any time and space and events. You're just being yourself. That's also present in the present thought. And beyond that is the entire history of you and your species and everything that exists. All of that is inherent in every single thought. It's all there. The ladder is all there. It's a microcosm of the entire development that resulted in this moment. And so in this process, there are 10 types of emanations that represent one unit. And the unit is manifestation itself. So let's say thought. In thought, there are 10 types of intelligences that result in a thought. And this is the process of the spheres. This is the process of creating content out of nothing. Not a real nothing, but a nothing that has no definition because it's infinite potential. To create something out of infinite potential, to create something out of nothing. And so always in life, the definitions are what are being created, because life itself, the force that lives, was there before the definitions. The definitions were created by the force in order to dress up the force. And so the definitions come after. And life is there in and of itself. And so the lights, the 10 lights, they give definition to the infinite in order for it to come forth into the manifested. They're like filters to the infinite light, but to us they are lights, they are shining, because even though they are filters, as far as we're concerned, they are the ability for these lights to shine and to interact with us. And so, for example, if we have a human being, the human being can interact through his organs, he can interact through speech. And yet, all the things that he's interacting through are not him. But if we wouldn't have had these things for him to interact through, then he would still be there, but we wouldn't be able to interact with him. And so in a similar way, the root of creation, the life force itself, it's there, it's present, but only through the details, through the filters that it dresses up in, can we interact with it. And so through that we can see creation, we can see the attributes of the Creator within creation. The attributes of the Creator within the creature that represents a sample of the forces that created. And so the 10 attributes, the 10 sfirot, the 10 intelligences, they represent 10 lights, and the 22 letters represent 22 vessels. 10 lights, 10 forces that are animating, and 22 vessels, 22 forces that are being animated. And so that's where it says in Mishnah Gimel, Eser spheres bli ma, mispar eser etzbos, chomesh keneged chomesh, bebris yochad mechovenes beemtze, kemila saloshe nechemila samoer. And so where do we see 10 in the creature? We see the fingers, and we see the toes. And this is testifying to the 10 within creation. This is the Creator testifying to the light that is one that becomes 10. And so we have the 10 fingers, and the 10 fingers are balanced between the two sides. And this is to teach us that these attributes, these sfirot, these intelligences, they come through, they create through the balance that is created between them. And so they balance each other out, and this is how life has intelligence. This is how we can continue existence, is because the forces within these intelligences are pulling in opposite directions so that reality can choose the right balance. And so, for example, there's the right side of the equation, which represents openness, kindness, and abundance, where the source, the unity, gives forth of itself without any limitation. And there's the left side, which represents restriction, which represents judgment, which represents protection. And so both of these sides, both of these attributes are going to exist within man. And then, because of these two, the middle, which is the actual manifestation, is going to have within it all these different ingredients. It's going to come out differently at different times. And this is represented by the right hand and the left hand. The right hand represents the right hand of the spiritual realm, the openness, the kindness, and the left hand represents the restriction. This is why when we give each other the hand for peace, we give the right hand, which represents the hand of kindness, the hand of love. Giving the left hand would represent some type of a conflict. And so this is the language of the spirit. And so we have 5 against 5. We have the sfirot balancing each other out, and then we have the center. And so for a human being, the body, the way that it was created, it creates 2 types of creations. This is at the essence of it. We do with it many different things. Like today, a person goes to work, he might do all kinds of work. But this is not really a human creation, because it's not the human body that's creating it. It's the intelligence within the human that's creating it. The human is using his hands, but it's not the human himself that's creating it. The human itself can only create 2 things: speech and children. This is the essence of creation. And this is what we were designed to do, is we were designed to create speech and children. All the other creations is things that we have invented. And so when we create speech, how is the speech going to be created? Through a balance of the 10 intelligences. Those are going to be responsible for what the speech is going to create. Based on how these intelligences understand the reality around it, that's what's going to result in speech. And so we have the 10 fingers of the hand, and we have the tongue in the middle. That is the one that's deciding which way it's going to go. And the tongue is up top, it's closer to the shoulders. And so by the shoulders already, the 5 and the 5 are already split. They're just going forward. The light is going forward until it gets to the fingers, so it can be available for action. The hands, the arms. But the arms really are in the shoulders, and the speech is between the brain and the heart. The shoulders representing still the heart, and the speech already representing more the brain, because it's in the head. And so there is what they call the tongue of the scale, which decided which way it's going to tilt. And the feet, we have ten toes, which represent again the 10 intelligences, but this time it's the 10 intelligences of creation that give continuation. This is the creation of the seed. And so the seed is like the spirit walking. This is how the spirit got from the ancient world to the modern world. It went there with their feet. What are the feet of the spirit? Is the seed as it gets passed on generation to generation. And so in these 2 places, and again, where's the machriya? The machriya is the Ever Abris that has the ability to choose which type of children are going to come, depending on our relationship with that entire area of life. Accordingly, we're going to have the ability to bring out the right seed. And so this is going to be machriya. This is going to decide between all the intelligences what is actually going to come forth. And so again, that's on top of the legs. From there already is the head of the scale that's going to decide which side things are going to lean, what's going to happen in the next generation, how's the tree of life going to evolve further, what's going to grow on it. And so these 2 are called the machrim, the Ever Abris and the Loshen The tongue is the king that's in charge of everything. The tongue is even in charge of the Ever Abris. But there's still conflict. This is the conflict between Yehuda and Yosef that's only going to be resolved by the final redemption of who is really the king, who is following who, how does it really work, what's the order of things. And so this is the Mishnah. Now we're going to look in the commentary. It says, Eses Sfiras Bli Ma, Perish Achar Shesida B'derech Klal B'Mishnah Echad Lamed Bayz Nesivit L'chol V'Mtzom B'Olam. First he told us there's 32 in all the worlds. B'Olam Shon Nefesh, in space, time, and consciousness, there's always only 32. V'Sidra Achar Kach Yit Sfiras Bli Ma, Mishnah Shniya B'Shono, Chukar V'Sidra B'Mishnah Gimel B'Nefesh. So now he's starting to speak about the soul, consciousness, and the language of consciousness is body parts. The body represents consciousness. If we want to understand consciousness, we need to understand the function of the organs and how they operate, how do they create spirit out of matter. This will teach us about the nature of consciousness. Because consciousness is a result of the combination of the organs when they work accurately. This represents a consciousness that's copying the consciousness that we have when we're not embodied. When it's embodied, it's much more limited and it's dependent on the information that we recorded in our bodies. When it's not embodied, it's infinite, it's huge, it can see and contain everything all at once. But the consciousness that we are experiencing through the body is giving us a sample of what consciousness is. And so the body is creating everything that's necessary to have consciousness in order to be able to recreate the consciousness that created us. And so if we get to know the organs of the body, we get to know the process of how consciousness works. How does nefesh, which is perception, which is the ability to exist and perceive, get colored in these different forms so that we can experience ourselves the way that we do. And so now he's talking about the nefesh, v'omer shegam chelkei nefesh asher hem b'chol ba'alei chayim hem b'yonim hem b'tachtenu hem b'chol ha'nitzon asher shebosem yit sfiras. So it says any type of soul, whether it's a soul that lives in a human that can speak and understand language, or a soul that lives in an animal that can only experience itself and its emotions in a much lower depth, or even if we're talking about the different plants, the different flowers, it says the root of everything is the 10. The 10 lights are the reasons why things dress up the way that they dress up. These intelligences are the cause of every expression, and the expression teaches about the intelligence. Somehow there's a relationship between what it made and how that thing is, how it operates, how it behaves. And from there's 10 different beings that all that exist take form from them. So it says in the human body, you're going to find 10 levels. So these 10 levels are going to dress in so many different ways. In every place where we're going to find existence, we're going to find the 10 levels. And so we can find it in the soul, but we can also find it in the body. And so it says in the body, the 10 levels that represent the 10 spheres are atzomos, is the bones, aschus is the cartilage, vatzabim is the nerves, vatzlaim is, I'm not sure, I think it's something that, it's like a sheet that covers the nerves. V'gidim adoifkim is the veins that have a pulse in them. V'gidim she'enim doifkim, the veins that don't have pulse in them. V'abosar, and the flesh, v'shuman, and the fat. V'amoach, and the brain, or also within the bones, the part that creates the blood, the marrow, vakshurim, and the parts that tie together the organs, all the different relationships between the organs, like we see by the knees and by the elbows. And so between all this, we have 10 different levels that are addressed for the 10 different intelligences. And this is how they express their wisdom, their truth in physical form. And so this representation, which is the human body, is going to contain all these levels of meaning, from the very physical function and place of that body part to all the different levels of influence that it has on whatever happens to a human being, all the different functions that's involved in the body, all the emotions, the emotional effects that it has, all the intellectual, spiritual effects that it has, and the meaning of it in the higher realms, and the souls that come from that part in their source. How are they different, and what do they do, and what do they want? All this is a language of spirit that represents the nature of how reality becomes the way that it is. How does it take on this form? Why is it the way that it is, in this shape, and in this size, and in this time, and in this place? And so there's a reason for all this in the essence. There's a reason for all this. But there's a language here that has been forgotten. There's the holy tongue that has been exchanged with illusion, with magical interpretations that are not tied to reality itself. And so we're trying to learn about the relationship between the spirit and the body in order to see and understand the nature of how the body is supposed to remind us the meaning of the spirit, the way of the spirit, the desires of the spirit. All these simple elements, the 10 elements that we spoke about, that together create the body, they're all created from the power of the fire, the air, and the water within the body. And so this is how the body creates. The fire is the life force itself that creates heat. And the air is the instructions, the wisdom within the spirit in order to formulate a home for itself, specifically in these organs, in order to grow everything the way that it belongs. This lives in the air, in the oxygen of the cells. Within them there's instruction of what they need to do and how they need to be. This is what animates the body. And the water represents the biological processes that are taking place, that are mixing the elements in the blood, that are creating the different tissues for the organs and the limbs. So it says, these were all created from the fire, the water, and the air. Within the drop of seed, the water has also heat in it that comes from the power of fire. So fire and water are mixing within the seed. And that starts the process of drying the seed. And so the driest part of that seed, when it gets into contact with the egg, when it fertilizes the egg, the driest part of it is the part that's going to eventually become bones. And this is because it had the element of fire in it more than the element of water. And the element of water, the wettest side, is going to become different things. So there's already the language there for what's going to become what, because there's the language of the elements as they're affecting each other, as they're having an impact on each other, and all of them are doing their work. And so also when the body is going to be fully developed, we're going to see that the nervous system which represents the fiery part of the organism, is going to be on the side of the head. And the more watery part of the organism is going to be on the side of the stomach. And the air, by the lungs and the heart, are going to be in the middle between the fire and the water. And so all of these are testifying to the nature of this process and to the forces that are involved in the process, and how we're supposed to interact with these forces, what we're supposed to know in order to be us. So this is the language of the Spirit, the language of the Source, that speaks as He gives us this specific form out of all the possible forms we could have had. So there's something very specific that's being said to us. And so the part that was most dry becomes bones. והרוח שבטיפ חוקק נסיבס וחלילן של הצומס בדרך שנזכר שהמים וחזו ליסוקים. So there's the spirit, which is in the ear of the drop of the seed, that the ear part is the one that wakes up and drives the specific developments within the cells so that it can create the vacant spaces within which the different parts are going to grow. And so all the empty areas within the bones, it's because the air that the Spirit dwells in, the Holy Spirit is drawing within them in order to create the proper expression of that intelligence and what it needs to do within the human organism. And so then the water in the area that was dry becomes more dry, and it becomes like a firmament. Hashem chazokim kiroide becomes properly strong mutzag vashetzav v'sar meyos etzem l'rov halaches shebo yosim v'isad asher chozel etzem chozel v'lo v'shturis aschus. And so the etzem is the driest of the seed, and the one on top becomes the cartilage. That's also dry, but not as dry. Asher rach min hatzomes, it's softer than the bones, v'kosher min haboser, but it's harder than the flesh. V'mumutze ben hatzomes v'atzabim, and he's in between the bones and the nerves. Ki etzev rach min haschus, the nerve is softer than the cartilage. Kitiva elach miteva etzem, he has the nature of moisture, that he is moist more than the bone, imiteva schus, and more than the cartilage. והצליים הם יוסר רק מן הצבים, והם מסחברים עם הצבים של פרוקים, ודויק של גב שלהם וגידם דויקים. So that slime is something that protects the nerves, and they are softer. He's just going down the list of how everything that's softer gets created by a softer type of material. And the same goes for the intelligences, that there are different levels of interaction of how Creator interacts with creation. Some of them are more to the side of compassion and trying to be gentle with the creature, and some of them are more on the side of getting to the proper destination, making sure that the development of the creature happens appropriately. And so they're both coming from compassion on top in the level of the three first sefirot that represent the intelligences that are beyond the attributes, that are directing the attributes. Over there, the only intention is what's good for the creature. There's no other intention to take into account. But they are on different sides regarding how to be compassionate to the creature. Is it by holding him strongly to the rules so that he doesn't veer off, and therefore whenever he veers off immediately he feels consequences, or giving him the leeway to figure it out on his own, even though he's causing himself a lot of damage and he's going to have to pay for that damage? And so what's the more compassionate way? This depends on the attributes they're measuring. And so the attributes to the right, they want to find a way where we can do it without suffering, without difficulty. And the attributes to the left, they are inclined to be more strict and simply follow the recommendations so that things don't deteriorate. And then there is a fallen side to that left, the side of the left that enforces things that are not even accurate, that are not right, or different protective mechanisms that cause harm to the human being himself or to the environment, to the people around. And so there's, on the left side, there's a lot of damage that can happen when the life force dresses up in that way. Because then it needs to be very accurate in order for it to help, in order for it not to cause more damage than it's trying to avoid. And so these attributes, each with their own level of balance between extreme kindness and complete restriction, they are the ones who are in charge of all these different levels of biology that have different levels of thickness and intensity and the ability to recover from damage. And so all this is related to the attributes that create them. So all this work of creating all these different compartments for the spirit so that it can create the right function within the organs and create an organism that can live for itself. All this is done with the power of Aleph Mem Shin, which represent the angels behind fire, air, and water. They are in the seed, and they're the ones doing all the work as they are fertilizing the egg and creating a child. And this happens in every type of seed, also in the plant and also in the animal, that the seed has within it the entire instruction of how to create such a creature, of how life can dress up in such a creature. And it's only through the seed that we can get that manifestation. The seed is the potential that is required in order for that manifestation to take place. And so within the seed are the instruction, is the life force already prepared and dressed up, and as soon as it's given an opportunity, it develops from there. So the dot of seed, which is like the goylem, which is like the potential, like the yud, like the chokhmah that has all the possibilities, bedam, in the beginning when it's created out of blood, through the air, the spirit that lives inside, it will become 10 different parts. And these are the different layers of the organs that we discussed before. It's just like the letter Yud, which is the potential for all the different manifestations, gets separated into 10 different intelligences. Just like from the simple ingredients that we spoke about that go into the body, from that the organs were made, from the flesh and from the bone and from the veins, from all of them together, and from the fat, from all of these together, from all of these raw materials, the different organs were built. And so it means from the 10 parts, different organs were built out of these parts. So just like from these simple organs, we created all these complex organs. The same way, from the simple parts of the 10 intelligences, all the different creatures were created in their length, in their width, and in their thickness, and to the beginning, the middle, and the end. Everything in its individual form and all of it together. All were created in this way, where the 10 dressed up into many different combinations and created the creatures that exist. Just like the forces of fire, air, and water are the reason why this seed was planted. From the heat, the heart becomes heated, and the spirit, the air, gets awakened, and the seed gets pushed out through the force of heat and air. And so you see how these forces are literally the creating forces with which it's being created, even the sample. And then within the sample, whatever happens to it after is still these forces that are doing it. And so after fertilization, the heat, the water, and the air are still active within the organs and within the limbs in order to create all the different forms of life that are going to come out within that body. Don't think that because I call these organs or these limbs or these body parts simple body parts, that they're not combined from air, water, and fire. And so everything is combined from these things. Nothing is just simple one form. Everything that is within the human body is a combination of these three. It has water in it, it has heat in it, and it has air in it, it has spirit in it. And this is how it can live, this is how we can experience it. And so the body is being balanced all the different organs within the body are a combination of four different liquids, four different nectars that the body releases. And these are called the lecha levana, the white one. Lecha duma is the red one. Lecha shchoira is the black. Lecha yeroika is the green. Four different colors of liquids within the body that get released by the body. And whenever these liquids are in their right balance, then there's health and there's prosperity within the body. Whenever there's an overage or an underage, then the body goes out of balance and then there's consequences. One of the famous ones is when we say someone has marash choira, so when someone has too much bitterness in them, he has too much of the black liquid. And this comes from the gallbladder. The gallbladder releases the black liquid, which is very acidic. So if someone has too much acid, he's going to have marash choira, he's going to have a difficulty feeling elevated and happy because his body feels the opposite. It feels frustrated or sad. And so all these different lechas are balancing out their bodies. So keine be'etzem asfiras, afa pishe kol galgal migalgal asfiras and pshitas mikol makom iaf sheshliya b'em koich emesh kedei kamesh maim nivrim esh. And so also in the spheres, there is a balance between these three elements that's creating the sphere. So the more there's going to be din in the sphere, we're going to say that there's more esh. And so the midas hagvura has a lot of esh. And the midas hachesed has a lot of mayim. But still, if it's an attribute, so also the midas hachesed has some esh in it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to exist as an attribute. If it was everything, completely just water, then he would go back to the original form that has no limit. He would go back to the Ein Sof. And so in order for him to be chesed and not be the Ein Sof, it means, yes, he's water, but there's some fire in it, keeping this water as an expression of the greater being. And then there's some air in it, there's a form of spirit of how this dresses up. And so everything is a mix of these forces together. So why we say the heavens are simple intelligences, it's because relative to the more complex, like the humans are the most complex. all the different heavens, all the different forces in the heavens have their expression within the human. But when we say that the sun is a simple force, it doesn't mean that there aren't many different types of molecules within the sun. But relative to the human, who incorporates so many different types of manifestations, so many different forces together reside within the human and together create his experience so that he can think and speak. Relative to that, the sun is a simple star. The sun has the same thing over and over and over again, versus the human who has contradicting things happening inside of him. And there are an entire army of contradicting things, all creating some type of a balance that is perfect. And so this is what's called a complex organism versus the simple organism, which is the sun. And so it's all relatively speaking, because of course the sun itself is very complex in its own way. וזה ששנינו ייד ספירס בלימה במספר 10 אצבעות. וצריך לדעת שכשם שכלב מעבר מהמרכוב יהיה שלם מבלתי שיהיה מרכוב מקצת אלו היד העבר מפשיטם המקילם, כן בייד ספירס בלימה הנמצוא עשה שבהם המרכוב כולם נסרק ומכוח ייד ספירס הפשיטם אשר זכרנו. כי כל אשר בגלגלי הספירס כולם נסרק ומכוח הפשיטם אשר בגלגלם. בדוגמה זה 10 אצבעות. So it says that the same way that there are these different parts of the body, like the bones and the nerves and the veins, and from these the organs were created, the same way from the 10 intelligences, all the different combinations were created within creation. And so all that exist are somehow expressions of these intelligences, including all the galgalim, meaning all the different stars and planets that rotate. So for example, in the solar system, we have the planets called Shetzam Chanchal, Shopsai Tzedek Madim, Chama Noige Koichav Levana. And these are the 7 that are visible to the eye. So these are the 7 that were counted in the ancient world. And so these 7 represent the 7 spheres. There's different versions of how to go, which 7. Some count the Bina, from Bina till the Yisoid is 7. Bina, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yisoid. And some count from Chesed to Malchus. Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yisoid, Malchus. But these 7 are an expression of the 7 attributes, and this is why they are there. They are creating a vibration that creates within us the vibration that we need in order to express these attributes. And so they're like the spotlights that are shining the spiritual meaning into the physical realm, so that the physical creatures, so that our bodies can know about these expressions. And then the human being can experience that expression. And this is called listening to the music of the angels. The celestial music is when the organs are performing exactly according to their higher settings. And then we can listen to the angels as they sing. We can listen to the planets as they're creating life, because it's within us that they're creating that life. If life is not hindered by anything else, then we can hear the angels singing. So V'dugma Zeh says he'll give you a place where you see the 32 forces within the body. Eser Etzbos, we have 10 fingers on each hand. We have 10 fingers between both hands. V'chol etzba mehem megimel prokim. Each finger has 3 different parts. And so 3 parts to the finger, 10 fingers, is 32 parts. It's 30 parts. Arei lamed plokim. Shnei perkayad arei lamed be'ezen series. Plus the 2 hands themselves, they have the 32 paths that are represented by the human body, the human nervous system, the teeth, and now also the fingers. Arei You have 32 paths. With this, everything that you're going to do with these two hands, which have the 32 paths. So the same way, the source, the creator, the one, he did everything that he did through the 32 forces that represent his fingers, his hands. כשם שעל ידי עברים הפשוטים מסקשים כל העברי ודם ליס לגפל לבשר אחד, עד שיהיה הרגש אחד מהם מספשת בכל העברים, ידיעס ההרגש. כן גם כן ויצפירס על ידי הפשוטים והצינוריס והנסיבס מסייחתם לחוזם כילם ליס אחד. וזהו שאומר איוב, ואחר אורי נקפה זויס מבשרי איך זה לה. He says, just like in our body, all the organs that were created from all the 10 parts, they come together and they create one unit that we can feel as one. And all of the parts are really a united being. All of the parts are being experienced as one, unity. The same way, the 10 spheres and the different roots, the different paths, which are the other 22 paths that connect these 10 spheres, that give them their expression, that allow for them to bring forth their light and their aliveness. And so through that, all the 10 spheres become one, just like the body, and they're felt as one and they're experienced as one. And so therefore Eov says, from behind my skin pulsates the one, Zeus. Zeus represents the Shekhinah, the one that's alive in all the worlds. From behind my skin pulsates the Shekhinah, and from my flesh I will see the divine. It's because from the body we can see how all the different intelligences create one reality, create one manifestation, create one being that is the only one. And so when we see from the body how all the different parts are one, this shows us a demonstration of the Creator where all the parts are really one. So everything that came out into being, even though it thinks it represents itself as something else, it thinks it has some type of a way to manipulate the situation, but in its essence, it's that same one. He's simply forgotten himself. He's in conflict with his own reality. And so in that source, there is only one, and that's the only one. It says in the divine form, he made man. It says, הנה הבינה שכן הלושן בפה, שמציעים אשר במחשבה מן הבינה, כן הבינה מכרז בין אלה מה שמעלה, בין אלה מה שמתחת להם. That the speech comes out from understanding. The chachma, the wisdom, resides in the brain, and the bina, the understanding, resides in the heart. And the speech is right between them. And that's called the das. The das is expressed in speech, which are the dimensions within the bina, which are the 6 different sides to which the understanding will reach. And these represent the attributes. And these attributes are present within the speech. And so the bina gets expressed through the tongue, and that's where there's the achra between all the different attributes. The das is machriya between the right and the left, and the up and the down, between the spheres that represent intelligence versus the spheres that represent action, manifestation, and the spheres that represent the right side, which is more kindness, more expression, more unity, versus the left side, more restriction, more protection, more structure. And so the das, the tongue, is the one that is going to decide between them. Like we said, that the tongue is the one that chooses how to manifest the 10 attributes of speech, the 10 intelligences that are involved in speech. And so there is the balancing point from everything that comes out. So just like he takes out from the mouth what he thinks and understands, so the same way in the higher realms, the level of das, the level of knowledge that is a result of Chochmah and Bina, that's a result of wisdom and understanding, is what separates between the higher world, which is the world of pure concept, and the worlds that get food from there, which are the worlds of emotion, the worlds of attributes. And so the world that's just pure concept, pure intelligence, has a process where it comes forth into the world of emotion and attributes. And this is in the das, this is in the awareness. So in the human experience, we feel that there is a conceptual truth that we experience in the mind, and then that becomes known to the body through the heart, and then we perceive and we react. And that reaction is an awakening of the attributes. When the heart understands, it has a reaction to what it understood, and that's the attribute that it's measuring as a result. And so the das is machriya between the higher worlds, the worlds of pure intelligence, and the worlds where there's already attributes, where there's already potential for restriction and judgment. The same goes for the process of creating offspring. He lives between the world of concept and the world of nature. And so between the world of intelligence, where the angels are doing their work, and the world of nature, where we see the results of their work, there is the koach of Yesod, there's this level of connection and manifestation where everything comes through, everything comes out into manifestation. And where do we see this example within a human being? Is that when he sees something that is exciting to him, and he thinks about it in a way of an interest, a romantic interest, then the body starts to formulate the power to create itself again in order to manifest. And so that's by making present something within the environment, this awakens something within the power that manifests and allows for new possibilities to come forth that weren't there before that. And so it says, just like the thoughts get born within man through the power of seeing and thinking, through that the special vessel awakens, it gets filled up with a spirit of divine life, to bring out this thought, this inspiration, this desire, to bring it into manifestation, from a potential into a reality, and to make a human being that previously wasn't into something that now is. And so this process chooses between the intelligences what is going to be the continuation of life, what are going to be the attributes within this continued life. This process that awakens this desire, that awakens this spirit, that then can somehow duplicate itself, this process is going to decide what's that duplication going to result in, what type of human is going to inherit the earth, and what is going to happen on that earth as a result. And so this process is in charge of this manifestation. That's why it's between the 10 toes of the feet, to say that there's this power that's going to choose between the 10 different intelligences how it's going to manifest the future of humanity. Now it's going to say for the 10 fingers, it says we can find this representation in the senses, in the human senses. It's vision, it's sound, it's smell, it's taste, and it's touch. This is 5 senses. This represents the 5 fingers of the right hand. connect them b'dimyon, koich eila ha'chishim, ki udam yedama riyesh mir reich li'ita mishish, gam b'chalon. So in your dream, you can also feel a taste. But this is not really happening in your mouth. This is happening in your imagination. And so your imagination also has 5 senses. It can dream that it saw. It can imagine that it saw. It can imagine that it smelled, it tasted, it heard, it touched. All these are imagined senses. And these senses are represented by the 5 fingers of the left hand. These are 5 physical sensations. These are 5 spiritual, imaginative sensations. And there's one unity that is at the center. Who decides what you're going to experience? The one that is beyond all these senses. So there's one beyond all these 10, and he's the reason for what you're experiencing. He's the reason for why are you imagining this sense, or why are you focusing on this sense, or why are you enjoying this, or liking this, or hating this, or wanting this. There's one that's in charge of that is riding on top of all these different manifestations. It's against the 10 vowels. All these vowels represent the spheres. They represent these intelligences that are animating the letters. The letters are the vessels, the organs that are being animated. Like, for example, the air, the fire, and the water. They're being animated by the intelligences, and the intelligences themselves were created by the source of air, fire, and water that is beyond them, which is the left, the right, and the center, which they manifested. The attributes manifest the right, the left, and the center, but the reason why they manifest the right, the left, and the center goes back to the original desire for creation that said, we're going to become many. And so we're going to become many resulted in one and another and the relationship between them. And so the one is represented on the right side, and therefore it's infinite and there's no limitation. The other is represented by the left side, and this is creation. Creation, the nature of creation is limitation. And the relationship between them is the middle line, is the center. And that's where creation is happening. That's where the truth lives. The truth lives in this relationship between creator and creation, which is the middle. And so these 3 are coming from the source. And yet, when we speak about air, fire, and water, we would say the intelligences created air, fire, and water, because this is already a lower manifestation than the original split into 3, the right, the left, and the center. And so these vowels animate the letters, and they're all coming back to and they all come back to the spirit that lives in the air that's receiving definition through speech. And so all of these forces are being manifested by the intelligence that speaks. And so they're not individual forces, they're not individual things, they're not separate entities. It's the intelligence that speaks that is manifesting through these 10 different attributes, through these 10 different portions of intelligence. Just like the body, just like everything that we are learning about, there is many, but they are really one. And the many are expressing the one. The many are there for the one. And then he says, there were 10 elements that came together for creation. The first one was machshava. The second one was hirur. Hirur is like a thought that's already more animating the heart, and it's getting ready to create. V'dimyon is when the imagination gives it form. V'soiris is an awakening. V'chayfetz is a desire. V'ruach is the spirit, the air. V'eish and the fire. V'mayim and the water. V'atocho means the ability to melt these elements or to make one into the other. Etnua and movement. So here you have 5 against 5. Machshava here, Adimyan and Esoiris and Chayfetz, that's 5. Thought, deeper thought, imagination, awakening and desire, that's on the one hand, that's the right hand. And then air, fire, water, melting and moving, that's the other 5. Ibris Yochad Mechavenes, and then there's the center that decides, is B'mila Saloshen, in the Mila of the tongue, Ledaber V'Litzos, that the speech and the desire that gets created through the speech should be aligned with the will of the unity that created all. V'amor Lamase, and the Bris Amor is the creation of children, that it should be aligned with the one who created all. This is in order to manifest these 10 forces. This is the unity that's required in order to keep the bris, to keep the covenant with the one who gave us the ability to do so. Today, most language is violating the covenant because it's not being used loyally for existence itself. And obviously it belongs to existence. Speech is a force of existence. And so when we use speech and it's not aligned with existence, we're creating conflict within reality. We're sowing conflict. We're using reality's tools to sow conflict within it. And so this is a violation of the covenant. This is why the world is not in a good condition, because we're violating the covenants that we have with the source. And so through creating the right speech, we're returning what's rightfully divine, what belongs to the divine, what should be an expression of the divine, to its original owner, to the one who should have it. Speech belongs to the force that lives in order to better life, in order to create the right desire between people and in the world and within the people themselves. Speech is there in order to help us worship the beauty of everything that is. And so when speech will come out of exile, humanity will awaken. And that will be the day when the one who is will know that he is. And we will know how to experience that, and we will never forget again. May it happen now.